Great. So welcome everybody. Mari, bienvenidos to this conversation, this very special conversation with the veterans, the OGs, the original strikers from the Third World Liberation Front here on the UC Berkeley side of things. Of course, this is a student strike that was initiated by the Black Student Union at San Francisco State in 1968 and continued to grow and evolve and build coalition until San Francisco State and UC Berkeley were all in full strike, shutting down both campuses until third world studies or third world colleges were the demands, right, to be founded, which eventually become what we have as a College of Ethnic Studies and Department of Ethnic Studies, and now all ethnic studies programs can trace in some way their origin to these original strikes and these original demands. So this is a really huge privilege to be in direct conversation with the founders of our field, right? Those of us who are here as ethnic studies scholars. So along those lines, I just wanted to ask that we start with a brief intro, just 1 or 2 minutes. I'm gonna kind of call on each of our panelists to introduce themselves, where they came from, a little bit about how they got involved in the strike, whatever you'd like to share. And we can just keep that short so we can get into the content of our discussion today. So let's start with, closest to me is Floyd.
Thank you so much, Professor Marcelo. I love saying Professor Marcelo. He's a real product of our program at UC Berkeley. So myself and Victoria Wong, who's also on the Zoom, we're members of the Asian American Political Alliance. We refer to it as APA. So in the future, when we say APA, you know what I'm referring to, which was founded in '68 and was invited by the Black students who joined the strike. We had already started ethnic studies as experimental programs before then with the support of our professor, Paul Takagi. And so our group unanimously voted to join the strike. And and so during the strike, I served on the Central Committee throughout. So I got to know Laneda and Isidro and Charlie Brown really, really well. So there's nothing like going through a strike of several months together, especially when you win the strike at the end of the strike in March of that next year. The Academic Senate voted 555 to 5 to support our demands for ethnic studies. We were not able to get a thorough college at that point, but we thought that was enough to begin the process of building toward a thorough college. So, and during the negotiations, I represented the TWLF with the chancellor to fight for every single full-time equivalent we could get to get our 4 divisions going. So that's African American Studies, Asian American Studies, Chicano Studies, and Native American Studies. And all of us were 2 representatives, 2 per group. We had equal votes, and everything had to be done by consensus. We couldn't outvote a group 3 to 1. Each group could veto the decision, and we pretty much used consensus decision-making throughout the strike.
Fantastic. Thank you, Floyd, for that intro. Can we hear from Estela?
Yes, yeah, I'm Estela Quintanilla. And I come from a small agricultural town in Contra Costa County, named Brentwood. And about 30% of us are Mexican. And it was our high school was stratified into different levels or groups. And there was the college prep and the general ed and the shop classes, if you've heard about that. So you know where most of us went. But anyway, somehow I was able to get into Berkeley with the help of a lot of people. And my second semester, or not semester, it was the second quarter, we went on strike. It was my second quarter. My father was all for it. He said I had nothing to lose. No one was giving me anything. And it was the right thing to do. And he did join us on the picket line. But I think he spoke to some of the Chicano leaders and said, make sure my daughter doesn't get arrested or doesn't get hurt. So I was given some easier tasks of taking care of the office and counting the blue meanies in the basement of Sproul Hall. So those are the kinds of tasks I was given. And of course, walking pick a line and joining the Asian Americans who would in the morning do the, I want to say the serpentine through the campus at 7:30 in the morning. You guys would get up early and you would go through the campus, and a group of you would march through. Sometimes I would join you. I do want to tell you that I never had a Chicano teacher, Chicano history, or any studies like that through high school. Never, until I went to Berkeley after the strike. And I never had any history about any people of color. And I only learned about the Japanese internment in the cafeteria from other teenagers who told me about their parents' experience. And I had to tell you, it was unbelievable to me. So anyway, that sort of pushed me to want to go to some place like Berkeley. And so anyway, that's my story. In the end, I became an educator. My whole motivation was equity for all people of color. So I have pushed for curriculum, instruction, and hiring, and for us to be on those committees to make those decisions. So that's what I did as a school teacher and as administrator at the district and school level.
Thank you, Stella. We can move on with Maria.
I think Clementina is there, right? Go through the actual vets first.
Sure, Maria is calling on Clementina.
Hola, hi everyone. Saludos de Albany, California, which is right next door to Berkeley. This is Huichin territory, and I come from Salinas, a couple hours down the coastal road, and Vicky, who's acknowledging, is also from Salinas. It is surprising how many connections there are to Salinas. You know, I didn't put it into context, certainly when I was a kid. I had the privilege, today I think of it as a privilege, of going to Catholic school for 12 years in Salinas, because out of that experience, what I really got was my basic skills. So today I can write fairly well. And so I have to acknowledge the people, the nuns that taught me those skills. Really, really important. And then I was a transfer student from Hartnell College in Salinas, community college, to Cal. And I came in fall of '68. And I lived on the north side of campus because I lived in a cooperative, which was the cheaper housing. So I was a little bit distance. I mean, it was basically across the street, a couple blocks, but I was still felt that I was pretty isolated on the north side of campus. And ultimately, I don't quite remember how I met Isidro Macias, one of the Chicano leaders. So he, invited me to participate as in the MASC, the Mexican American Student Committee. And then it's when I started meeting other Chicanos. And I have to say that Isidro called me a Mexican American because of my perspective or lack of, perspective about politics. But I tell you, just like that, UC Berkeley got me involved, and TWLF specifically got me involved. And so from that time on, I've been very politically involved. And like Estela, who's my comadre, it's a small world of TWLFers. I became an educator for 30 years, first in Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, and I never quite strayed far from this community here. And I'm retired now, and I serve on the school board in Albany. And it's really important because I see the students that are coming up that need to be so aware of what's going on. And so I just, am here to urge you as the next leaders, because we really need you. I'm exhausted, and I want to retire from the politics, but I need to see all of you there really involved. So thank you for the invite, Professor Marcelo.
Claro, thank you so much for joining us. And I think as Maria was asking, let's finish with the strikers, and then I'll call on the rest of folks. But I think Vicky, if you could introduce yourself.
What'd you call it?
Oh, did you want me to talk now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please,
Yeah.
Vicky.
I'm Vicky Wong, and I grew up in the salad bowl of the world where you get your lettuce, your strawberries, everything. Salinas, like Clementina, and I was a farm worker, and by the time I was 12, I helped co-found the first farm workers union in Salinas, and then I also got involved because Fort Ord was nearby, which at that time was the biggest military base in the country and the shipping point to the Vietnam War that was starting at that time in the early 60s, 1960s for you. And anyway, so I got involved in that and the peace movement, and then with the whole, with the cultural youth movement, the hippie music, everything happening all at the same time, and the civil rights struggle, and I was immediately, fascinated by what was going on in the South, and I tried to run away from home and join the Freedom Riders in the summer, but my parents found out. And then also the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee at that time, which was the more radical group, more radical than Martin Luther King's, the Peace and Freedom Party types who were sitting in. And although at first I was part of that as well, but I was one of those younger, impatient people who wanted to do more. So I tried to join the SNCC in the South, but they told me I was too young. So they sent me stuff and I formed a baby chapter, they called it. So by the time I got to Berkeley at 17, I was already a seasoned movement activist, and we just called everything the movement, everything was just one big thing. The peace movement, and the war, and the draft, farm workers union struggles, everything was one big movement. And so by the time I got to Berkeley, I was ready. I was already supporting the Black Panther Party that had just formed in Oakland nearby Berkeley, and then I got caught and helped co-found the Asian American Political Alliance with Floyd. It was the first Asian American organization ever founded, and we coined and popularized the term and concept of Asian American, and joined, the Third Liberation Front as soon as the Black Student Union at Berkeley went on strike. And after that, I was, went to the community and worked in Asian American communities like Chinatown, Japantown, and then I also was into cultural work. I joined a radical band, and I toured with Rock Against Racism in the early 70s, late 70s, I'm sorry. And then, so I've been doing all kinds of things like this. And I always think cultural work is very important as well, because I was always doing skits. And I encourage anybody doing that, you continue to always do cultural work, as painting, whatever is such an important part of our struggle as well. And I'll just end with that for now.
Thank you, Vicky.
Miguel.
Oh, yeah, Miguel is there as well. Maria is calling on
Where
me
is it?
again.
I missed it. Oh, launch meeting.
Oh,
There we are. We're here. We're back.
Okay, go Miguel.
Buenas tardes todos. I came to Berkeley in winter of 1968. I was one of the first students who got those grants and funds. What do they call them?
EOP.
EOP. But I had lived in San Jose for about 4 years, East San Jose, always working on the canneries, and at night I'm going to junior colleges. I was a transfer also. I went to a couple of junior colleges in San Jose, and then in '68 I transferred from San Jose to Berkeley. But I grew up in Ecuador. I was born in Guayaquil, and the city with Che Guevara was one of these stops on the way up here, al north, to Mexico. And I used to walk through in front of his house. But in those days, in the early 50s, I was in an elementary school, like Clementina was saying, I had the privilege of going to a Catholic school too. And maybe that's where I got some of my basic skills. But anyway, in 68, I came, and after being in San Jose for 3 years, in San Jose, I met Malaquias Montoya, the greatest artist, Chicano artist, my friend. That's one of the first Chicanos that I met. And we actually met in San Jose City College, we started the club Los Amigos. Not before Mecha, Mask, and all of that. And in 67, I was in the City College. That's when they killed Che Guevara. And then I learned the whole thing about being the internationalist of the Cuban Revolution from Latin America. So I came to Berkeley, and then you have all these Chicanos all getting organized and forming a mosque. So I joined. And, you know, every group looks at me and they think I'm Chicano until they hear me talk. Like one of my students in middle school, when I was teaching middle school, Mr. Fernandez, you talk like Tony Montana.
From Scarface, they don't know.
So anyway, and that's how I joined the strike, the Third World Strike. I guess passing for a Chicano or
No, yeah.
You don't pass? Well, I mean, it's the same situation. I mean, Latino Americanos and the Chicanos, I mean, we're seeing the same and the same discrimination. And when we were there, we were less than 100 students out of
87.
87 to be exact, out of 28,000. So he had no choice.
Gracias, Miguel. I think now we're ready to go with Maria. Now, are you ready?
Okay, hey. I just want to thank you, Marcelo, because it's always good to be back with the vets, because I think you could tell, I mean, through everything this whole life, not even getting our third world college and seeing a lot of what we had hoped would be implemented, not implemented. We haven't lost our spirit. We're not broken. We still love life. We still are so happy to connect with the younger generations, because this really is a generational struggle. So thank you again for this invite. Hey, vets, you are my hero still. So I guess for me, I see myself more as like an auxiliary soldier or the brigade, because I was at Chabot College, and the thing was, during those times, 68, there was national walkouts for education. The high school students were being tracked, like Stella said. I was in clerical. They had wood shop, you know, but hardly any of us were being encouraged to go to college. So at Chabot, there was a movement with the Black students and the Chicano students to open the college, but there was, you know, there was no social media, but we had all of these newspapers that were filling us in on what was going on all the colleges. So when the Third World Strike erupted at San Francisco State and at Berkeley, we saw a whole different, like a violence against students, because it wasn't just Black and brown and internal, but the Third World Strike linked the war, the anti-war, and third world people abroad. And it just opened up to explain our whole global situation. And, you know, in the late 60s was a global movement, a shift, which is like what is going on now, that we feel, you know, this is the second like shift that could really make the changes that were systematically denied, not only over these last 50 years, but, you know, 500 years. So the solidarity was a big impact for me at Chabot to see, you know, what was going on there. And I wanted to be a global, I wanted to understand. I was always asking why is it like this? Why? So when the strike at Berkeley, when they gained their supposedly the rights to a third world strike and college, I transferred. I went over to Berkeley and I didn't know how to actually apply for transfer, but the pool of what was happening at Berkeley between Native and Chicano and African American and Native American was the kind of solidarity that I felt really explained, you know, why it was necessary to fight for liberation, especially in education. So, yeah, so I went over there, and the thing that was so inviting was, even though I wasn't a student right at first, because the strike was so student oriented and was so community oriented, I was able to get involved that way before I actually applied for transfer and continued on the third world, you know, what I believe was the third world efforts. In fact, 50 years ago, this year, a group of third world women from the Bay Area, from Berkeley, we went up to Vancouver to an Indo-Chinese peace conference because the Laotian, Cambodian, and Vietnamese women wanted to meet with third world women here in the US that were against the war. And that event solidified the sisterhood of third world women abroad and at home, and just really impacted us so much in terms of, like, they say the war is over, but the war in Vietnam, it goes on because of the dioxin that was left on that land and the kind of harm that it's done to future generations. So, you know, the whole thing about being against the war and why are we at war and the empire building really is an ongoing battle. So that's why I'm here to connect with the younger generations.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I think last we have Nina.
Last but not least. Gracias, Marcelo, for inviting all of us to your class today. It's always an honor to be around Marcelo, Dr. Marcelo, and all of my previous colleagues from back in the day when we were up to no good trouble.
Good trouble.
My name is Nina Genera, and I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. I was there for 12 years of my life. Like, you know, I'm listening to everybody's mini biography, and I hear myself, a little bit of myself in everybody else's biography. So it's kind of like encapsulating all of my life from among my own friends. That's why I think that's why we were able to work together and struggle together in this effort, because we all came from similar backgrounds. First generation college. When I was 12, my dad was transferred from El Paso to Sacramento because of the railroad. He worked for the railroad and things started to close down in El Paso. So they transferred him, and that's how I ended up in Sacramento. So I finished the rest of my high school years in junior high and high school years in Sacramento, and then went to community college, like most of my colleagues transferred to Berkeley after community college. And like everybody else, you know, we were part of the farm worker struggle, the movement, picking tomatoes in the summers, and to help my dad, who was our only source of support, with, you know, make it ends meet. So from week to week, we would find ways to pay for our schooling, our food. So it wasn't like, you know, coming from generations of people who had gone to college. It was like a first experience for all of us. So when I went to Sacramento City College, I went just because a friend of mine was going, not because I had any intention of going on to college. In fact, I wanted to work full time, but my father didn't let me. And he wanted me to get a college education because he had gotten a third grade education and my mom dropped out of high school to help make ends meet for her family when she was young. So in going to college, it was kind of like everybody else, you went to college because you were just following what was next in line for you to do. And I really had no long-term goals other than like what Maria explained to you earlier, that, we were all kind of put into different kinds of tracks. And so I was in the track to become a secretarial science major, typing, doing shorthand, that kind of thing. So, and it was called secretarial science. If I had stuck to it, I guess I would have been a scientist of some sort. But instead, after my 2 years at community college, I was fortunate enough to be recommended to start in a program similar to the EOP programs that developed later on at Davis, which is right down the street from where I lived. And I went my junior year to Davis, and that's when all the, as people would say, when all the chingazos started flying at Berkeley and at San Francisco State with a third world strike, that helped me transfer to the university, to Berkeley for my senior year. So like Maria, I didn't actually participate in the third world strike, but I was a beneficiary, one of the very first beneficiaries of that strike, because part of the demands was to open up the floodgates of the university to other third world students. And so we were fortunate enough to be recruited by people like Estela. In fact, the people that recruited my husband and I was Francisco Hernandez, who actually became vice chancellor of different universities of the UC system. And then ended up in the University of Hawaii at the very end. But because of him, who was a student like we were, and we were working in a summer program called the Mini-Corps program, he was able to recruit a handful of Chicanos from that program. And then I think, everybody who is here on the panel also went back to their little towns to recruit people that they knew to start at Berkeley. So that first fall of '69, when I started, right after the Third World Strike, the university allowed 100 students of each ethnic group, I believe, to enter the university. So I was among the first 100 Chicanos after the Third World Strike to enter the university. And so because of that, having known that the struggle was still continuing, just because we were able to enter the university didn't mean that we had an ethnic studies college going on yet. They were basically departments, and there were no faculty members to fill it. So the struggle then continued after we got the demands met. The struggle continued to fill the positions of faculty members, and many of the faculty members that first year were graduate students at the university who took on the reins of teaching us about Chicano studies. And we had no books. There was nothing out in academia that was written by people of color yet. So we became the first people to start doing research and documenting some of our research. And many of the graduate students who were our professors were the first to actually come up with the literature that is now, timeless for us and for all of you to read about our history and our culture and our predecessors. So when I came to Berkeley, one of the things that struck me was that because of the Third World Strike, because of ethnic studies, we took it beyond the walls of the university. Much of our education, like everybody else said, was our continual involvement in many of the issues that were going on. Mine primarily were the farm workers struggle and the Vietnam War struggle. Farm workers because I came from that background, and the Vietnam War struggle because my brother was recruited. He was drafted to against all of our will to serve in Vietnam. And so that became like a primary source of my activism, was to try and educate young Latino, Chicanos, young men to avoid the draft and serving in the war through legal means. So we trained as draft counselors, and we went throughout our community. Actually, we went throughout the valleys, the Sacramento valleys, San Joaquin valleys, Salinas valleys, doing skits that Maria Elena would write, and then she would recruit us shy people to act them out. And we would present them to our communities to educate them about all the things that were going on here in the States, that we should, challenge or try to make our lives better for ourselves and our children. I'll stop there and, get maybe throughout the rest of the session, we can talk a little bit more about some of the things that we were involved in.
Thank you so much to everyone for all of that. Just reflecting back a couple of things I'm hearing, that it's really cool to hear that a lot of transfer students. Okay, so shout out to transfer students. I myself am a transfer student. That's how I found my way to higher ed. And then a lot of you all that have been organizing for many years. And I think something I always learned from you all is that the Third World Strike in so many ways was just the beginning, right, of now 52 years of a life of organizing that you all have sustained in communities. So that's like such a huge testament to the vision of ethnic studies, of third world studies, right? That's what it's all about, sustaining that lifelong work. And you all have found your way to do that in an education and outside, right? In so many other sectors. The last thing I want to also do is just give a shout out. Dr. Lenita Warjack was supposed to join us, but is not going to be able to for family reasons. She has something coming up. But I just want to give at least a plug to her book, Native Resistance, for sure. You can look this up and buy it directly from Dr. Lenita Warjack, who was the only woman leader of TWLF, of the 4 groups that came together, and was the main representative for American Indian students, was one of the first Native students ever at UC Berkeley, and is also sustained. It's been an incredibly important activist and leader in Indigenous struggles for these past 50 years. But she, definitely check out some of her work that she's published. We read her article for today. My students read her writings for today, as well as your piece, Vicky. We read your piece on cultural struggle. So I'm also, so for the sake of time, we have about 20 minutes left. So I loved hearing all the stories, right, in the bio and the how you all came to this, to the strike. But I do want to make sure that you all have some chance to interact with the students. And this is that moment in class where I annoyingly ask you all, whoever has access, to unmute your videos. It's always nice to build community if anybody is in a position to be able to do that, to see each other's faces. Especially so our guests can, see what some of Cal State San Marcos students are really working on. So I have my own questions, but for the sake of time, I really want to prioritize the students in the space to really give them priority. To if there's any questions that you all have, you can feel free to pose them in the chat, or you are also welcome to unmute and pose any question you have for the veterans, especially for our Race in the University course. We spent 3 weeks studying the strike. So the fact that you all are here is really great, to be in that direct dialogue with exactly what we're studying. So yeah, I'll just kind of open up the floor if anybody has any current students have any questions for the vets. If not, I have my own. Don't be shy, students. Right, I might pose one then, and if any students want to be posing them in the chat maybe as they're responding would also be great. But I just really, so in this class, we've really been studying the idea of race in the university, the idea of different student struggles. We started with you all as a specific critique of the university, a critique of epistemology, a critique of of education at large, and how it's framed and how the importance and the power of it. But if any of you could speak to like, what is your hope? What was your hope and what is your hope for this, for ethnic studies, for third world studies? And you and I, a lot of you all and I have had the chance, I met most of you in the 40th anniversary, and then we organized in the 50th. So we've seen kind of the current state of ethnic studies in different places. So us at San Marcos, right, have had 20 years of a minor and a few years with a major, and we're just really emerging with an ethnic studies program. So my question is for you is, yeah, what is like, you know, just the priority, the most important parts for you of ethnic studies? Like, what is it that ethnic studies brings that can never be, should never be overlooked, shouldn't be cut out? Floyd, I see a hand.
Thank you. So I think this class is what we had in mind. I think the self-determination that led to your program being started and having your professors and the students determine what's important to you. So relevant education. So we immediately went, as Vicky said earlier, to the community. I went to Oakland Chinatown, she went to San Francisco Chinatown, and we started many programs that are now the major institutions in our area. Asian Health Services included, the East Bay Asian Local Development Corporation in Oakland, in San Francisco, the International Hotel Struggle started. So in other words, it's relevant education, not just in books, but in ongoing practice. And I think that connection to community is the single most important thing that we wanted to establish. I must say at Berkeley, because we never got our thorough college, whereas San Francisco State did, they've done a better job staying connected to their community. And as you know, our TWLF grouping is quite critical of UC Berkeley right now, not having those ties. So we want San Marcos students to maintain that connection. So make sure there's ongoing relationships between your classes and your own community. And by community, I mean your friends and family. It's really nothing more than that. So if there's need for tutoring, if there's need for you know, more pre-medical courses and interest of a doctor, whatever the needs are is what your program should be serving. That's really the bottom line. The other thing I wanted to add about our first few years, and this isn't discussed too much, I was one of the first coordinators, so I took my check and I signed it over to our department because I had other income coming in, and that money was used to hire more fieldwork assistants to work in the community. So we had that kind of collective approach, so from each according to his ability kind of thing, and to each according to their need. And that was the ethos of the our founding division. I also want to mention that decisions in our division were made by 6 graduate students and 6 undergraduate students. Professor Takagi gave those 12 people the full power to run our division for the first few years. I think we were probably the most democratically organized division within the 4. And that continued on until I left to go to medical school. So, and Vicky can comment more about that.
I'm also seeing a hand from Clementina and then Vicky, and there's an awesome question in the chat too. So make sure you all look at that. But go ahead, Clementina.
Okay, what I kind of wanted to mention that never can be taken from us is a sense of pride that I got from participating in the strike and the aftermath of that, which was classes that were conducted by Chicano and teachers, professors, and others of color. You know, I didn't realize what I was missing until I saw what could be. And unfortunately, we have a long, long ways to go. And, you know, 52 years later, I don't know how it is for you young people at down south, but up here it's still really bad in terms of representation, not only in terms of students. For example, Latino kids in the public schools today are 55% of the population. Yet at UC Berkeley, the undergrads are basically 18%. And that was only because Cal has now participated in what's called a Hispanic serving institution. And the reason that is, of course, is because of the money involved, right? It wasn't because all of a sudden, or for years, they really cared about us. So I think the sense of pride, though, is so important. And when I see young kids who have that at the high school, and you can just see it, and they're proud of who they are, regardless of what the name is, right? Because today there's such a diversity of, are we going to be called Latinx, Latine, Chicano? You know, that's discussions that are going on. But as long as we know who we are, it makes all the difference in the world. And the only one other thing I wanted to mention in terms of what was an important element of our strike at Cal was a sense of solidarity. And it was beautiful. You know, I didn't know Vicky and Floyd at the time, but there was just this feeling that we were united and that we could, you know, kick ass without, without, even though we said on strike, shut it down, we really did not shut down the university, but we got many allies through the process. So one thing you do learn is all the allies that can be, available and that share some of your issues and concerns and ideals. And today I would just say that solidarity is really a value that if you can maintain, it is so important, because once again, it takes all of us. It really does to challenge the institutions and to change them.
Thank you, Clementina. And I think Vicky wanted to respond as well. And I love seeing folks in the chat as well. So you can ask questions in the chat, and also veterans, feel free to respond in the chat and just keep that going. But Vicky, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we the people have a history where we've lived in an upside down world that our people have been trying to turn right side up for centuries. And initially, our indigenous peoples built amazing civilizations for their time, in some ways that eclipse some of the technological wonders today. So much so that true scientists and engineers are actually going back to apply some of that ancient wisdom of how to live in balance with nature, communalism, and harmony, and what has been the dominant force uniting peoples across the globe. Freedom, fighting oppression, not just against oneself by another, but understanding the cause of the oppression, who the oppressors and the oppressed are, and why our struggles are linked together. This has caused civilization's true progress as our humanity advances together. And let's just say it, what we've been taught is not American history or even white American history, but white supremacist history.
Right.
They're the minority, in other words, and they dare tell us that we had no right back 50 years ago, and now they continue to say that we have no right, we're so inferior, we have no ability to talk about our histories. You know, they dare to say that. They continue to dare say that. And in other words, what's really restricting the scope of our education and critical abilities? It's how they've been brainwashing us with all these centuries from Europe on down to the colonies. America was a colony, remember? It's just a tiny fraction of what our real people's history has been. I mean, it's this much that they've had over 500 years of domination to tell us this is the best type of civilization we can ever come up with? Really? I mean, just look around you. This is really the best you can do with the people homeless, with all the natural disasters, with the COVID, again, pinpointing it's the third world people and marginalized and poorest people who, again, are the biggest victims of these even natural disasters, let alone the man-made disasters that they've made by segregation. I mean, we've been brainwashed all these centuries, and we are trying to declutter our minds. This is what the third world strike was about, the third world college should be about. And I see these questions, I love these questions, and I know it's really hard, but they're the timeless questions. How do you organize? How do you unite? It's hard. It's really hard. There's no easy manual we can give you. We can tell you to unite. We can tell you solidarity is important. They all are. But how do you do it? And the only way I'm sorry to tell you is you have to try to do it. You have to try to do it, just like the kind of society that we want to build, a compassionate, kind, all the things that Marcelo mentioned in terms of how we want to treat each other with respect and everything. This, you had self-determination, all of this. You have to start again by respecting yourself and respecting others. And we did that just, in terms of, I saw one of the things is police violence. Yeah, because the war strikes were the most violent strikes ever, especially in UC Berkeley history. But I mean, we respected the man, we respected Governor Reagan, we respected them in terms of, we understood that they had the ultimate power in enforcing their rule through the military and police, which they unleashed. And they will continue to unleash them, whether you're a pacifist or not, whether your demonstrations peaceful or not. They will continue to unleash that because that is their final and best weapon they can to keep people down, because they're going to have to continue to keep people down. That this is the thing that we respected that, but we showed enough disrespect too to handle them. And I won't get into details because we had a lot of people arrested and suspended, but that never again, as other vets have pointed out, never broke our spirit, because that just united us further. And it actually ended up mobilizing more people in support of our strike. The more they come down, the harder, we come back and improve to others and mobilize to others, just like what you see with George Floyd and all the Black Lives Matter struggle with the Occupy US. I mean, they're always going to use that power, but we have to learn how to use it against them. And again, the main thing I'm just trying to, without monopolizing more time, is to organize. You just have to go out and be more motivated by, you can't take it anymore. You really can't take it anymore. You want things to be fair. You want things to be right. You can't see somebody, freezing on the street, being turned away by hospitals, not having anything to eat, just because. Why is this all happening? You can't take it anymore. And you should be, you're here now. You're supposed to be learning in the greatest bastions of the ivory tower of academia to what? Just to better your own life? Really? Is that what you're here for? Well, fine. That I can understand your parents are paying for your education and they just want you to get a better life too. But what we understood by doing the strike, and the more you understand that when you organize and unite with other people to fight for things that are the right things to do, it's the only way truly for a better life for yourself and your family is to unite with others for a better life for all of us. That is how we're really going to have a better life, not by just focusing on yourself, because then you might as well poke your eyes out and be blind when you're trying to step over a homeless person on your way to the best restaurant, I mean, that's the way you're going to have to live then, if that's what you mean by a better life and using your education for that kind of a better life. So I'll let other people speak on this point, but I really hope you continue to keep asking us questions like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is such a rich thing. I feel like we're just getting going as we have our last few minutes together. But please keep it coming in the chat. There's some great questions happening about just everything from these strategic questions that you're talking about, Vicky, to about how do you translate from coming from your communities you're coming from, communities of color, into predominantly white spaces. There's conversations around self-determination happening here. But I wanted to make sure that we have maybe time for one last word on these questions around, the importance of ethnic studies. And I think, Ray, maybe in that last minute, we'll be able to close. If I believe Maria has prepared one of her poems for us, and that'll be our closing. So make sure you stay around for that. But we're in these last, anybody have this last word based on that maybe somebody haven't heard from yet? Nina, is that a hand?
Yes, just really quickly, I wanted to say that, after Berkeley and getting all of my education under my belt, I went on to become an educator, and I was a counselor for 31 years at a community college up here in Northern California, and at Ohlone College in Fremont. And so having been a counselor all these years, and also I taught ethnic studies, Chicano studies courses there at Ohlone. One of the things that I came to the realization after the fact as an adult is that having started like you also are starting out, I didn't know how much of an influence I was being for my family, for my neighbors, for my family, my neighbors, and people around me who were watching me and watching what I was doing. And so that's what I want to leave with you today is that I know Jason, was it Jason or somebody earlier had said something about, how do you organize? How do you get involved? But you also have to, I know Vicky said, don't do it for yourself, but be aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, because we were given two hands, and in each hand, I always used to tell my students at Ohlone, if you can bring one more person from your family, from your neighborhood to college to learn about our ethnicity, our history, our culture, our backgrounds, and by taking an ethnic studies course, a Chicano studies course, that's how you're contributing to making this a better world. You're bringing at least two other people, they will bring two others, and then those people will bring two other, and it'll snowball eventually to where one person can influence a whole gamut of people, a whole community of people, because if you do the right thing for your community by setting the example, then you will have had that participation. I mean, it doesn't have to be in marches, because I was very shy and I didn't want to get involved, and I was always afraid, kind of like that fear of what happens, if I go to these radical things and I get busted, then what's going to happen? So little things like boycotting the lettuce, boycotting the grapes on behalf of the farm workers, participating in small actions will bring great results, because you're being watched by other students, by your own siblings, by your families. And in terms of leaving, I wanted to address that issue where somebody said, how did you feel about leaving your people behind? Did you feel guilt? No, because I think that by my actions, I brought them along with me. I mean, my whole family has always boycotted things. I'll call them and say, back in the day, don't buy Coors anymore because this is what they're doing to Chicanos, or don't do this, or don't buy that, or do this, and support so-and-so. All of those are things that you can influence your own community. So through ethnic studies, you learn what the issues are in your community, and then you take your knowledge and you expand it by taking it back to your folks, by taking it back to your families, to your communities, and getting involved. If you don't plan on going on to graduate school, get involved in one of the agencies in your community and learn more about what your community needs are and help out in that respect.
All right, so on that note, I will say a couple things. One of them is that we're at our official time, but I'm getting multiple DMs and people requesting if anybody who wants to stay in conversation, I think we can keep going. We are at the official time. I will acknowledge and respect also, especially our students' time. If you have another course you have to go to, totally understandable. But if as many of the vets can stay on for a little bit, some students want to keep going. If you have, I'm not going to keep you all day, but maybe just extend another 10 or 15 minutes would be great. If that's cool with folks, and get some thumbs or thumbs down. or you can say thumbs down by actually leaving, because some folks are gonna have to sign off, which is fine. The other thing I'll say is I do want to acknowledge a couple of things. One of them, you're making me want to acknowledge that my mom and my partner are signed into this, right? So it is part of bringing in our people, right? And our close friends. And when we're saying community organizing, it really is just start with whoever is really right there with you, right? They're in other rooms in the house, and just start there, right? Let's just organize in that way. And then that's a very concrete way that we can just start organizing in our community, right? Clementina is reminding us we're not alone, part of the people. Salma is asking about the recording. We have a YouTube channel for the program, so that's what this is going to go up. Oh, Michelle's got it in the chat. But yes, just because we have a lot of momentum, I'm not sure if there's other veterans that wanted to respond or if there's other questions that want to get posed. But let's have the last couple. I think there's still more that students wanted to ask. So if there's any other responses to that, any of the vets had to the questions that have been asked so far.
I would just say that we kind of look at ethnic studies as the true antidote to white supremacy. And especially in this year, this historic time where, you know, only white supremacy is being heightened. It's like it's heightened. And so they try and minimize the white-black paradigm, right? They want to keep it to that. And I think ethnic studies is what can, you know, shatter that, because we not only support, you know, the Black lives and that issue there, but we also like validate, you know, hey, look, this is the land that whites came to, you know, so let's start with the land and the people on the land and who they brought over. So not only the 1619 project, which is so important, but we like support that with the 1492. That's when it all started. And in 1521, when Cortez declared their domination and brought in white patriarchy to this land. I mean, there's so much historical time that we can start using to break down that myth that white supremacy built this country, and it's dominating the world. We can counter it through third world solidarity.
Thank you for that, Maria. So I will ask, are there any other questions that haven't been posed yet, right? So I'm going to reiterate some of the pieces that I saw happening in the chat. There's a lot of movement in the chat for really the spirit of third world liberation and what that looks like today, right? So I also got a question about that around the issues in education today, like, right, what is the state of education you know, in relation to what you all saw the state of education, you know, 52 years ago. That's another question here. But yeah, it's really open, and we have, maybe we can hang out for 5 more minutes, and then, and if Maria, if you want to close out with that poem, I still want to hear your poem. Yeah. Floyd has a hand.
I think that the fact that the state of California, which by the way is the biggest state in our country, which by the way is 1/7 of the economy. In fact, the only reason the American economy is growing is because of California, by the way, which is primarily made up of minority people. That's the hardworking people in the LA factories and making that production. You know, so the fact that we established a requirement at the Cal State system is a major accomplishment. It is the spirit of Third World Liberation Front, no matter what the organizers of that can point to specifically, but it is our movement that began that struggle 50 years ago. And now it's a requirement in every state college in the country. And most school districts, including Oakland School District, where my daughter works and coordinates ethnic studies, requires that for graduation now. It's a major opportunity to push this forward to many, many people, young people all over the state. so that all people are conscious of their own power. So the slogan "Power to the People" is real when it comes to that. It's education is the key. My parents were both, my mother was a garment worker, my dad was a cook. I'm a physician. I mean, that is accomplishment. And I think all of us can do that. No matter what your goal is, the main point is to have it self-determined. Is determining what you want to do. If you want to be a culture worker, make revolution in that way. Marcelo is a wonderful example of that. He's taught me a lot with regard to spirituality.
Yeah.
Just watching him operate when we ran our commemoration a couple of years ago. I don't know if he knows the impact that he has on us, because that wasn't a particular strength of our strike. We were into the, shut it down, get the picket lines going, that kind of thing. We were much more into that than the culture, but the culture is what reaches millions of people.
Thank you, Floyd. And speak to the intergenerational piece. I've met a lot of y'all's children and grandchildren, and they're all movers and shakers, right? So it is intergenerational for sure. So Clementina has a hand, and then I think we should, for the sake of Zoom fatigue, we can hand it over to Maria to close us out with the poem. So go for it, Clem.
Okay, I just wanted to say quickly que la lucha sigue. It's going to continue with your children and your grandchildren too. So just the fact that we recognize that and say, si se puede, we can do it, but it's hard. Today, Vicky has talked about white supremacy and Maria as well, and it is so strong. Don't know if you know that, yes, there was legislation around ethnic studies, and we did not get what we wanted. As people of color, we did not get what we wanted. It is whitewashed totally. I'm sure you're aware of critical race theory and all that discussion that's going across the United States that has been highly controlled from what I've seen by Fox News. So just to say, the struggle will continue and you need to be strong. And education is one of those tools that will help you to be strong, and your own sense of pride and your sense of solidarity with others. So good luck to all of you, and que siga la lucha.
I'm seeing another hand from Vicky, and I can't turn that down.
Oh, yeah.
And
So I'm not trying to make this short. I just want to say the community thing. Your community, that's why I don't feel any guilt about leaving Salinas. Man, I spent most of my teen years growing up there trying to, count the days I could leave that hell place. I mean, your community should be expanding. And I'm not saying, the people shouldn't go back to where you came from. That's fine too. It's whatever fits with you, because you're going to be growing and changing throughout your life, and you will find a community that you feel you're most comfortable with and working with. So that's different for everybody. Some people can go back to their roots. Other people will find their roots deepening in other parts of the world and places they never even thought of. That's what college also should be part of. That's what we wanted. Third world studies is truly the most interdisciplinary studies. It's not limiting at all, like the English or whatever. It's the most. It should be expanding. It should be where you do have the most fun, where you're exposed to the most different ideas and places.
It should be liberating.
Yeah, it should be. It's liberation. That's what we're talking about. That's what and it's the most critical. It should help you to be very critical about everything and think for yourself and speak for yourself. But it's also, the more you speak for others, you will find you will be speaking for yourself. That is where I found my voice. It's hard for a lot of people to believe. I was very shy when I grew up. And now you can't shut me up. But it changes when you start think of others beyond yourself. It's amazing how you get out of your own head and your own problems and your own feelings of isolation and loneliness or whatever, and feeling weird, especially when you're a kid and you're growing up in a place, that like Salinas was to me. And I mean, and Clementina and I both came from the worst part of Salinas. They didn't even want us, they called us El Sal because they didn't want us to be incorporated in the town. It was like where the worst crime was and everything. But anyway, I mean, that's your community is expanding. That's the point I want to get across. And so the guilt thing, yeah, I understand we're you know, about, oh yeah, I should go back to where I came from. But on the other hand, you came from the whole world. This is what liberated us from the world, from just being a minority to understanding, hey, Thorough people in the 60s, we realized, are the majority of the world. It's the white people who are the minority. And yet, you know, we were thinking, again, that's why my whole thing is we're thinking in a bizarre world and an upside down, when we're turning things the right side up. We're standing up finally. We're not looking from down there bowed, you know, like the Oriental rug carpet that they roll out whenever they wanted to throw us out as a model minority. You know, we're actually the majority of the world. And now in this country, and especially in California, we are the majority. Dual people are the majority. And especially in public schools, and I think in CSU, it's actually 77% of students in the CSU system who are thorough people. And yet, how many teachers do you have like Marcelo or any, you know, how many why are we still even fighting to have our histories in the classroom? And that other people can't benefit from learning from us? Hey, they don't mind, you know, getting served by us or eating food picked by us or taking transportation or being protected when you go to the museums, mainly dominated by white people in terms of power. But who's doing the security? It's third world people. It's us. So, you know, we're not the minority. We're the people doing the main bulk of the work who've enriched this country, not just recently, but forever, just since America was born. So just that's hard. And this is your community. And right now, whether you want to know it or not, you're actually an activist by being part of this class.
Way to go, Vicky.
So on that note, I am going to wind us down, and also my mother in the chat is holding us to
Oh no.
Maria
Wow.
poem. And we get some love in the chat as well, but let's close it up and give it the floor to Maria to close out.
Thank you. Okay, so it's called It's Time to Decolonize Your Mind. It's time to decolonize your mind. We've been miseducated for so long. Many of our youth think going to college is wrong. If they're proud of being bright, they get accused of acting white. It's time to refocus all your great energy in order to fulfill the sixth son prophecy. So if you are a seeker of knowledge, then one way is completing college. It's not a white thing, it's the right thing. Now, some of the kids don't want to hear that. We know, but we're here to tell you, you really should go. In ancient times upon this land, our indigenous ancestors had an education plan. Respect for all people and the natural world were parental instructions to each boy and girl. Self-discipline, self-knowledge, it was the key to fulfilling each individual's destiny. Education for every child was free. In fact, it was compulsory. That is up until the 16th century. That's when the conquistadors came from Spain, causing destruction, upheaval, and pain, enslaving our bodies and our minds, rewriting our history, leaving us with a colonized mentality. Today, you can see the results of these lies. Our precious youth are dropping out of school like flies. The achievements of so-called darker nations have all been denied in order to foster a form of white supremacist pride. But the truth shall set us all free. Bottom line, it's a necessity. The science of mathematics, logic, astronomy, of philosophy, physics, chemistry were all discovered by non-white people. You see, the art of letters, music, poetry, drama, sculpture, painting too, discovered by people of color. It's true. The use of metals, principles of mechanics, even architecture, discovered or invented by people now called inferior. The high ideals of American freedom and democracy. Thank the foremothers, the clan mothers of the Iroquois Confederacy. So whether you're black, brown, red, yellow, or white, a good, relevant education, it's a human right, a human right. Getting back on track is no big mystery. You start by learning your true history. Decolonize your mind. Let the light shine from within. Seeking wisdom is where you begin. Keep going. We gotta keep this going.
Here.
Thank you so much, Juanita. Thank you everyone for coming, for sticking around. We will be posting this recording, which I'm going to stop right now, but we can hang out and let folks trickle out. But thank you so much to the veterans for all your work, and all those who are here and those who came before who couldn't make it.
Thank you all.
Ancestors, thank you so much.